Hello. I see that Madam has joined. Nirmala Kulkarni Madam. Shall we start, Shakuntala Madam? Hello. Hello.
Yes, I made her the co-host.
Yes. Shall we start then? Sumanta ji?
Shakuntala Madam is not there. I think
I'm making Dr. Sumanta the co-host.
There is some
Sure.
network issue.
No issues. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I just made
So
Dr.
I
Sumanta
think
the
we can
co-host.
start now since the chairperson has joined. Namo Namaha. A very good morning to all. I extend warm welcome to all present on this second day of the 3 days International Conference on Bhakti in Vaishnava traditions, which has commenced yesterday. From yesterday, through scholarly lectures and deliberations, literally wonderful dimensions of Bhakti have been unfolding before our eyes, like kaleidoscopic images. So that journey continues even today. And I'm so happy to welcome you all to academic session 2 and session 1 of today. We are really lucky to have Dr. Nirmala Kulkarni as chairperson for this session. I extend warm welcome to you, madam. In this session, there are 4 papers. The paper readers are Prakriti Goswami, Dr. Kyo Kazuo Okita, Dr. Siddharth Satpathy, and Dr. Shakuntala Gowdy. So, with the permission of the chair, Madam Kulkarni Madam, shall we start the session? Hello? Hello? Kulkarni Madam, shall we start the session?
Balramila Prabhu, have you made ma'am the host?
Dr.
Yes, she
Nirmala
is already,
Kulkarni.
she just has to unmute herself.
Hello.
Okay. Yes.
Hello.
Madam,
Please make Shakuntala Madam as co-host.
You can start now.
Okay, madam. Thank you. Let me begin by introducing our chairperson, Dr. Nirmala Kulkarni. She is presently working as a research scientist at the Center for Advanced Study in Sanskrit at the Savitribai Phule, Pune University. She was selected as convener at the World Sanskrit Conference at Vancouver, Canada in 2018, and will also be shouldering similar responsibility in the forthcoming World Sanskrit Conference at Canberra, Australia. She has worked as elected sectional president at All India Oriental Conferences. With a consistently bright academic journey, she has completed her PhD on the topic, a grammatical analysis of the Taittiriya Padapatha. Her 5 books have been published and a number of research projects she has completed. She has delivered lectures and presented papers at various national and international conferences. She has received many awards and honors too. We are really glad to have an eminent scholar like her as our chairperson today. So with her permission, let us go to paper number 1. Our first paper reader is Prakriti Goswami. Let me give her a brief introduction. Prakriti Goswami is a doctoral candidate at Indiana University, Bloomington. She has completed MPhil from Cambridge. As a member of the direct lineage of Vallabhacharya, her scholarship mainly focuses on the orthopraxis of Pushti Marga and the Vedantic hermeneutics of Shuddhadvaita. The areas of her special interests are Braja Vaishnavism and the role of poetics, music, and aesthetics in the devotional theism within Indian religiosity. The topic of her paper today is Bhakti in Pushti Sampradaya. I request her to start her presentation. Prakriti Goswami.
Namo Namaha. Good morning to everyone present here. Thank you so much for organizing this. It's an absolute pleasure to be here and an honor. And so my only complaint is that I cannot attend this entire session due to the time difference, but very happy to be here. So I'll be sharing my screen for my presentation. I hope everyone can see the screen.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So as it was said that my topic is Bhakti and Pushti Sampradaya. Most specifically, I'm focusing on the emotional reciprocity in the devotional aesthetics, which is how Vallabhacharya's commentary on Bhagavata Purana. So before I dive right into Bhakti, I do want to say that Vallabhacharya's Sampradaya is among the few Sampradayas that are based on like Bhagavata Bhakti Sampradayas. And the combination is such that the epistemology or the pramana vyavastha of the Vallabhacharya Sampradaya is rooted in Bhagavatam, and the orthopraxis or the liturgy of the Sampradaya, that is the day-to-day practice of Vallabhacharya Sampradaya, is based on the culture of Braja. So as my professor Haberman says, Vallabhacharya Sampradaya is part of the greatest of Braja Vaishnava culture, and because of and also the idea of
Oh, so can we hear Prakriti ji? Are people able to hear her?
No, sir. No.
Prakriti, you just lost your voice. You're not muted. Can you check?
okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's good. Good now.
Okay, I'm not sure what happened there, but okay, we're back on the track. All right. So as I was saying that this sampradaya combines the element of Braja Vaishnavism and Bhagavata Bhakti traditions. Now, I would dive right into the definition of bhakti provided by Vallabhacharya, which is Mahatmya Jnana Purvastu Sudhir Sarvatodika Sneha, which is Shuddhadvaita ideal of devotion that is classified by mindful awareness of the glorious magnificence of God, coupled with the unswerving love for him. So as it can be seen from this definition, it combines two paradoxical elements, which is the awareness of the cosmic glory that establishes a transcendence between the devotee and the God, and unswerving love for God, which makes God accessible. And to explore this in more detail, Vallabhacharya classifies the devotees into two categories. The first is Shuddha devotees, the pure devotees, which are the devotees of the age of descent. The age of descent is when Krishna walks the earth. So Shuddha devotees are definitely the Gopikas, and Mishra devotees are the devotees of the mundane age, which is known as the Anavtara Kala. And the way he differentiates between Shuddha and Mishra is the idea that Shuddha devotees are the one in which God is already present, because obviously it is Avatara Kala, so God is walking the earth. So God is already present, but bhakti needs to be manifested. So God is manifested, but bhakti is unmanifested. The radically opposite idea of this is the Mishra devotees, which are in the mundane age, and God is not present here. So here, bhakti is manifested and God is unmanifested. So bhakti leads one to God. In the age of descent, God leads you to bhakti. So that's how Vallabhacharya differentiates. But the more important aspect of this idea is the fact that despite the idea that God is already present in the age of descent, they still need to be led to bhakti. So that just the presence of God is not enough. So what is the element that transforms the ordinary emotion into the extraordinary emotion of love? And for Vallabhacharya, that is the cosmic awareness, is the awareness of the cosmic glory of the God. And so he classifies Shuddha devotees as Nirguna Jivas, and the Mishra devotees into Sattvika, Rajasa, and Tamasa devotees. Now, because of our time constraint, and because I also want to focus more on bhakti, I'm not going to elaborate the details of Sattvika, Rajasa, and Tamasa jivas, but I do want to say quickly here that Vallabhacharya is talking about three basic faculties: the emotional, the mental, and physical faculties through which one could serve the Lord. And those who are able to strike a balance between their physical, that is kriya, mental, jnana, and emotional, that is bhava, are the sattvika jivas. Those who are only able to strike a balance between two of these faculties are rajasas, and those who are only involved physically but lack the emotional or the mental faculties are the tamasa jivas. Against that, the Nirguna Jivas obviously are unique because the way Vallabhacharya sees them is that God is in the driving seat. So God is actually driving the chariot. So they are led by the gods. So they are not hampered by the Sattvika, Rajasa, and Tamasa gunas of the Prakriti. All right, now another thing that relates to this idea of cosmic awareness is the idea of Adbhuta Rasa. Whenever we speak about Bhakti Rasa, we often think about Vatsalya, we think about Sringara Rasa, and all the other emotions that are part of Bhakti Rasa. And based on the Vallabhacharya's definition of Bhakti, that is Mahatmya Jnana Purvastu Sudara Sarvatodika Sneha, I read that definition to mean that the Adbhuta Rasa is the most important, the core, the fundamental element of bhakti, because this is this awe or the emotion of wonderment that one feels when you watch the glory of God is what transforms the ordinary emotion into extraordinary emotion. And we see this pattern repeated throughout Krishna Janma. We see this Krishna as a little boy, but sometimes he kills demons, he kills Putna, he lifts Govardhana, or he vanquishes Kaliya. So ordinary looking boy does extraordinary things. And we see this pattern right at the birth of Krishna. As soon as he's born, Devaki has all the maternal instincts, but he transforms into Narayana Rupa to give the glimpse of his cosmic glory to Devaki. And it is at that instance that the two ideas, that the sneha, the love of the mother, and the awareness of his cosmic glory that humbles Devaki, combine to form Bhakti Rasa in her. A similar pattern is repeated in the Bhagavad Gita. And we see Krishna talking about his inherent divinity throughout the chapters of the Gita. But it is not unless he shows his cosmic form that Arjuna is completely awed by it. And as soon as he sees that, we see a complete Sharanagati, which is a complete surrender to Krishna there. And the chapter is immediately followed by Bhakti Yoga. So according to Vallabhacharya's view, this combination of the cosmic awareness of the Lord with the unswerving, unadulterated love for him is what generates bhakti, and it's pretty universal. With this, I will come to the idea of Nirodha. Now, the reason I want to talk about Nirodha is that when we talk about Adbhuta Rasa, or when we talk about this idea of ordinariness combined with extraordinariness, we find that throughout Krishna Lila, Krishna sort of oscillates between this. As I said, like, you know, he appears to be an ordinary boy who occasionally performs some very extraordinary miracle-like acts. So he oscillates between this. And for Vallabhacharya, the reason he oscillates is for the motive or for the purpose of Nirodha. So what is Nirodha? Now, Bhagavata, in his thematic framework, says that Nirodha is the motive of the 10th canto. Now, Nirodha is, Bhagavata defines Nirodha as Nirodhasya Anushayanam Atmanaha Swashaktihi. There are other commentators of the Bhagavata, especially like Sridhara Swami, who believe that because of this definition of Nirodha given by Bhagavata, which defines Nirodha as the slumber of the Blessed Lord with all his powers, because it is talking about slumber, it is talking about the dissolution of the world, and therefore Nirodha should be the theme of the 12th canto. This is the popular argument by many Bhagavata commentators. And they see 10th canto as the Ashraya theme because Krishna is the refuge of all devotees. However, Vallabhacharya's view on Nirodha is slightly different. He distinguishes Nirodha into two categories. Again, he says that Nirodha is Sadhana Nirodha, the preliminary stage of Nirodha, and Phala Nirodha, which is the advanced stage of Nirodha. Now, in the preliminary stage, we have this Bhagavata definition of Nirodha, which is Krishna, the supreme reality of the world, descends to the world by constraining his power to play act. What it means by it, so when we talk about the slumber of the Supreme Lord, we are not talking about dissolution, but we are talking about the idea that his powers are constrained. So his powers are sleeping, because Krishna, although he occasionally shows his Narayana form, he's not constantly in his Narayana form. He appears to be an ordinary cowherd boy. And when he appears like that, he instantly becomes accessible to the people of Braja. This accessibility of Krishna generates intense love for him that we see in the people of Braja. And occasionally, as he shows the glimpse of his powers, that makes them slowly aware of his cosmic glory, and they slowly progress towards bhakti. So that is the idea by which Vallabhacharya is going. So that is what sadhana nirodha is. So it's the anushayanam, the slumber is just his powers of the Supreme Lord are being constrained by him. And this actors, and that is why Krishna kind of oscillates between ordinariness and extraordinariness. And this leads the devotees to the Phala Nirodha. He defines Phala Nirodha as Prapancha Vismriti Purvat Bhagavadasakti, which is a condition in which the devotees are so immersed in Krishna that they forget the material world and become passionately attached to him. I would like to quickly point out here that Prapancha Vismriti is different, like Prapancha is distinguished from Jagata in Vallabhacharya's ontology, because Prapancha, Jagata is the pure Sattva element of the Satchidananda Brahman, the pure element of existence of Brahman. That is manifested in the form of the created world. But Prapancha is what the individual selves in bondage create out of ahanta and mamata. which is the idea of me and minus. So when an individual soul attaches itself to the world and sees the material world as its own, he creates his own world within this created world, which Vallabhacharya refers to as prapancha. So Jagata is actually a pure form of Krishna, but prapancha is what is created out of Maya. And so the Phala Nirodha is when the jivas forget the prapancha, or they forget their own self and get passionately attached to Krishna. So that is the thematic framework of the 10th canto. So here, it is important to remember that in this two distinction of Nirodha, the former is characterized by Lord's descent for the soteriological play acting, which is, so the creation in Vallabhacharya's universe is happening because of play acting, Leela, or just the divine play of the Lord. And the first element, which is the reason why Krishna constrains his power, is to attract the devotees towards him, because the devotees would not be attracted to his transcendental form. So that is the soteriological play acting for the salvation of the devotees. And second is the devotees' response to Krishna's play acting by immersing themselves in him. So these are the two stages of Nirodha. And Vallabhacharya further says that Ashraya is therefore not seen as a soteriological concept, but rather an ontological concept. That Krishna is Ashraya because Krishna is the substratum of the entire universe. So when universe dissolves, it dissolves into Krishna because he is the Ashraya of the world. And therefore Ashraya comes at the end, that is the 12th canto. So that's how he sees Bhagavata's bhakti framework, theme of the Bhagavatam. And this brings to perhaps the most important, the core of my topic today, which is bhakti rasa. And one of the most glaring, striking examples of bhakti rasa that Vallabhacharya likes to give is Krishna in the wrestling arena. So, and Krishna, when he appears in the wrestling arena to defeat the wrestlers of Kansa, he appears differently to different people. So he's appearing like a thunderbolt to the wrestlers, incarnation of love God to women, and so on and so forth. So everyone see him differently. Krishna, it's the same person, but they see him differently. But there are only one category of devotees, which is the Vrishnis, who see him in his complete form. So by taking the example of Vrishnis there, who see him as the Supreme Lord, Vallabhacharya is emphasizing the idea that Vrishnis, who are Krishna's own family, are aware of Krishna's cosmic form. So they have the difference between others and Vrishni is that because others only have ordinary emotion for Krishna, that is, they lack the awareness of his cosmic glory. So it's not bhakti, it's an ordinary expression of love. So they are only able to see one pattern, like one rasa of Krishna's form. But Vrishnis are able to perceive all kinds of bhavas, all kinds of rasas in Krishna. And that, he says, is bhakti. That is the concept of service to Krishna, when you can experience all sorts of relationship with him, because he is the source of all sorts of relationship. He is the source of all kinds of rasas. So we now understand that Vallabhacharya is speaking of bhakti as the love that is aware of Krishna's absolute sovereignty, and it is also of the fundamental non-duality between individual self and Brahman. However, when we talk about non-duality here, we are not talking about the Advaita of Shankaracharya, which is pointing to an undifferentiated unity. But here, Advaita is understood as a non-difference which accommodates all the differences, that is Bheda Sahishnu Abheda, and Brahman is characterized by the paradox of opposite qualities. And Vallabhacharya is drawing this from Chandogya Upanishad, which states that one who sees things and understands the self to be in all direction and everywhere has the pleasure in the self, Atmarati, and delights in the self. And thus Atmarati speaks of the identification of the individual self with the Supreme Self. And this Atmarati is what Vallabhacharya says is the cosmic divine dance of the Ras Panchadhyaya. So when Gopikas are dancing with Krishna, it's not just a dance, it is the identification of this individual self with the Supreme Self. So it's a cosmic dance. And in this tradition, the orthopraxis of this tradition, Atmarati is often manifested as in the form of Sri Radha. So, and that brings us to this idea that this self-delightment forms the ontological basis of bhakti and is expressed by the devotee through unconditional and unmotivated love for God. So nirupadhi, which is basically an idea of nishkama bhakti, that it is unmotivated love for God. And because he is the reservoir of all rasas, I think we have Brihadaranyaka in mind, where Brahman is referred to as Raso Vaisaha. So he is the reservoir of all sorts of rasas. It is only through devotion that this cosmic rasa of Brahman is expressed, experienced, and manifested. So non-duality in Vallabhacharya's tradition does not limit the scope of devotion, but is the very feature that separates the mood of bhakti from the other moods. And so, coming to his liturgy, Vallabhacharya states that devotional service to Krishna, which is seva, should always be practiced, and the mental perfection of the service is considered to be the best. And he uses the word that devotional service to the Krishna should be performed constantly. Krishna seva sada karya. So he uses the word sada. It's often discussed that how could you constantly be in service of Krishna? And it is explained that constant service does not just refers to physical involvement in the process of devotion, but to the mind being completely intent on Krishna. Like a form of yoga where mind is completely focused on the object of devotion. Secondly, it describes a state of mind which is fully intoxicated by the devotion. Hence, it is constantly in the mental service to the Lord, which is the phala nirodha, that is the lived experience of total love. Vallabhacharya calls it total love because it's the totality of all rasas, it's the totalities of bhavas, it's the totality of all relationship experienced with a constant, complete awareness of the cosmic form of Krishna. And this leads us to the final slide, which is a wonderful paradox. So he talks about the idea that when you experience this total love, the pleasure of this total love is far greater than the liberation. So he distinguishes between Bhajanananda and Brahmananda. The distinction is that in Bhajanananda, you're able to experience the love of Krishna through all the sense organs, while in Brahmananda, only your soul or this individual self is completely immersed in Krishna. So it's like getting immersed in sugar. So if you're immersed in sugar, you are not able to taste the sweetness of sugar. So he contrasts that with Bhajanananda and Brahmananda. And he explains that this oneness is therefore greater than the non-dual merger of the yogis, for even in their mental embrace, Gopikas experienced the amalgamation of the rasas through all their sense organs and reached the pinnacle of bhakti rasa. And this brings us to the role reversal, which is the ultimate paradox. Like Krishna says to the Gopikas, that all of you have merged in me through devotion, and I did service to you all, and I will never be able to repay your debt. So here, Bhagavata presents a deeply paradoxical notion of devotion, where the deity, who is described as the embodiment of bliss, Purnananda, and eternally satisfied in his own self, Purnakama, is also indebted by the very devotion of his devotees and can be in service to them. So the deity is in service to the devotees. So Vallabhacharya's theology culminates at its climax with the soteriological paradox in which God, who submits to the devotee's love, and devotee values the joy of remaining bound to samsara as God's blessed servant over that of being liberated by attaining an undifferentiated oneness with the Supreme Self. So that is all I have. I wanted to save some time just to keep some time for the questions if we have any. So I'll keep it at that for now.
Hello. Thank you, Prakriti ji, for this informative and interesting paper. Now the paper is open for discussion. Those who want to ask questions, you can raise your hands.
Yes,
Okay,
Yokazu, you can start.
All right. So my name is Kiyokazu Okita. Thank you very much for your presentation. I enjoyed it very much. I have many questions, but maybe limit myself to this question of rasa. So I've been working on the history of Bhakti Rasa, and I'm just curious that Vallabhacharya, if he has some sort of like a justification about like why bhakti can be rasa, because if you look at the earlier rasa theoreticians, sort of bhakti is not really accepted as a rasa as such. So that's one question. And then another question is that you suggested about adabhuta rasa, which it sounded like that was sort of your opinion, but does Vallabhacharya say something about adabhuta rasa being sort of primary? These are two questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Okitaji. You guessed that absolutely correct. I would go with Adbhuta Rasa first. So yes, that is my reading of Vallabhacharya, because he talks about cosmic glory so much, and it is such the awareness of cosmic glory and the resulting non-duality between individual self and the Supreme Self is so important to Vallabha that I feel that Adbhuta Rasa is the very element that transforms the ordinary love into extraordinary. If you take out the element of wonderment, it's just ordinary love. It's only when there is an influx of the awe that you have, like the Arjuna had when he saw the Vishwarup, or when Devaki had when she saw the Narayana Rupa, is when it transforms that into bhakti. So yes, that is my interpretation. And as for your first question, so Vallabhacharya, although is not talking too much about rasa and its definition, because that is not his focus, he is seeing bhakti as a rasa in a way that it's an amalgamation of all rasas. So it's not a rasa in itself, but it's an amalgamation of all rasas. And he points out the fact that in ordinary world, it's impossible to experience that kind of amalgamation with a normal person, because you cannot have parental emotion and romantic love with the same person. But you can do that with Krishna. And the reason you can do that with Krishna is because he's the source of all rasa. So the idea that he's the source of all rasa is coming from this awareness of non-duality, that he's source of rasa, he's source of relationship, he's source of emotions. And so you can experience this totality with him. And so that's how he sees Bhakti Rasa, as a totality.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your question.
Yeah, am I audible?
Sunil Kumar ji. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I have a simple question as to how did Vallabhacharya's thinking impact the later Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition? Because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates were in Navadvip, which was reportedly a center for the Nyaya or logic tradition. So how did his thinking imbue the later Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, and to what extent does this thought derive from Vedic precedent, as in the Vedas and the Vedanta? Thank you.
Right. So as for your first question about how does it impact the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, I don't think I'm completely qualified to answer that because Gaudiya Vaishnavism is not my area of research. But I could say that one, Chaitanya Sampradaya and Vallabhacharya are contemporaries. So I'm not sure if they have influenced each other at the same, or Vallabhacharya has influenced Chaitanya or other way around. They are contemporaries. There might be later influences. Unfortunately, like there has been less dialogue and more of other things between the Sampradayas. Chaitanya Sampradaya and the commentators of Bhagavatam in Chaitanya Sampradaya follow Sridhar Swami's idea of Bhagavata tradition, in which Nirodha is seen as the theme of the 12th canto. As I explained, Vallabhacharya is sticking to his format of the Bhagavatam. So there are disagreements in how they see Bhagavatam. But my professor definitely calls these sampradayas as sister sampradayas because they are both based on the Bhagavata Vaishnavism and rooted in Braja Vaishnavism as well. I'm not sure if that completely answers the question. As I said, I'm not very qualified. And second, for the Vedantic basis, I would say that entirely, like Vallabhacharya constantly quotes, like I'm sorry, I have to rush through the presentation because of the time constraints, but he's constantly using the Upanishadic basis for coming up with his idea. Like when he's talking about Bhakti Rasa, he's using the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, where we have Raso Vaisaha, that Brahman is the reservoir of all rasas. So he's drawing the idea of Bhakti Rasa from that concept. So Upanishadic, and that basis is extremely crucial for Vallabhacharya, extremely crucial. And in his epistemology, he has this idea that Ekavakyata, or the synthesis of the Brahma Sutras, the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishad, and the Bhagavata are together responsible for forming your basic thesis. So yes, the synthesis of these scriptures are extremely important. I hope that answered your question. Thank you very much. I don't know how many more questions I can take. Please let me know. I am open to it. But
I think we can take only one question by Mr. Rajesh Bhayani. And for time schedule, sticking to time schedule, we'll have to go further. Rajesh Bhayani ji, please ask.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. See, in the context of the Ras Lila that happened for the first time when Krishna plays flute and all gopis came to the Vana and the dark night. And later on, after that Ras Lila, Lord disappears. Now that particular time frame, which is according to Bhagavata sequencing, it is that time gap between Laghuras and Maharas. So how do you view that the disappearance of God and gopis, the reaction to that phase in terms of Nirodha Phala Bhakti?
Right. That's a great question. And also my problem is it's such a broad, it's such a detailed answer to that, but I'll try to keep it short. Basically, before we talk about these two, we need to understand that there are one set of gopis who were unable to join the rasas, right? And they remember Krishna and get immersed in him. That happens. And the idea there is that because they had, Parikshit asks this question, that why did that happen? Shukadeva said that they had jara bhava, or the ordinary love, like a lustful love for Krishna. So they were not able to join this rasa, which is supposed to be bhakti rasa, in which is the dance of the individual self with the supreme self. So only the gopikas who were aware of Krishna's Brahman form were able to join the rasa. And so these are the gopikas who are aware of this rasa. But over the time, when the rasa begins, their ordinary emotion triumphs their extraordinary emotion of bhakti. So they get arrogant in that. So it triumphs the extraordinariness, and they forget that they're not dancing with this beautiful boy Krishna, but they are dancing with the Supreme Self. And like the Supreme Self danced to create the universe, this is the personification of the creation itself. And when the instant they forget that, Krishna disappears. And we know that they forget that because they get arrogant. And therefore, in Gopika Gita, you find this Gopikas talking about the glories of Krishna. In fact, the very first verse of the Gopika Gita, Jayati Tedikam Janmana Vraja Shtreta Indira. So you know that they are talking about the glory of Krishna, that since you came to Vraja, the Lakshmi itself is situated in Vraja. So they are slowly humbling themselves, surrendering to Krishna as the Supreme Self. And it is that instant when they realize this again, and when their extraordinary emotion of bhakti triumphs over their ordinary lust, Krishna reappears. And the second time, they are steady in their bhakti rasa. And so that is called as Maharasa, and against the Laghu rasa. So that is in short, and I'm unfortunately elaborate that more. But thank you very much for all your questions. I do see another hand there, but I'm very sorry. And as I was told, I can only take one more question because we have next presentations lined up. So it was my great pleasure to be here. Thank you very much all for all your questions. Namaskara.
Sure. Thank you, Prakriti ji, and all the participants for these wonderful exchanges. We are sorry that we could not take further questions because we have to stick to time schedule. There are 3 more papers to go in this session. So these questions you can actually communicate with the speaker later on, surely. Let us go to the next paper with the permission of the chair. Our next speaker, second paper in this session, will be presented by Dr. Kiyokazu Okita. We welcome you, sir. He is presently working as Associate Professor at the Faculty of Liberal Arts, Sophia University, Tokyo, Japan. He is a research fellow at the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies, University of Oxford, as well as visiting faculty at the Center for the Study of Hindu Traditions, University of Florida. His doctoral thesis focuses on Vaishnava Vedanta in early modern North India. Based on the thesis, a monograph titled Hindu Theology in Early Modern South Asia has been published. His research interests center around Indian theories of aesthetic experience and their engagement with Hindu devotional traditions between 15th to 18th century. I request Dr. Okita to start his presentation. Dr. Kiyokazu Okita.
Okay, thank you very much for your kind introduction. Let me share my paper on the screen. Let's see, so this one here. Right. Well, so first of all, can you hear me? I hope. Can you hear me? Yes?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
and now do you see my paper shared?
Yes,
This
perfect.
Okay, thank you very much. So namaste, namaskar to everyone. Thank you for joining, and thank you, Professor Sahasrabudhe, for your kind introduction. Thank you, Professor Kulkarni, for being the chair. and facilitator. And I also like to thank Professor Gaude here for inviting me to join this panel. I must say I'm very excited to join this opportunity. Okay, so without further ado, let me read. So I prepared this paper, and basically I'm just gonna read through the paper, and then I look forward to having a discussion with you later. So Bhakti in Dvaita Vedanta, based on Madhvacharya's Bhagavata Tattparya Nirnaya, on the first 3 verses of the Bhagavata. Introduction. It is said that Madhvacharya, the well-known founder of the Dvaita school of Vedanta, rejected Advaita Vedanta and introduced his teaching of dualism after reading the Bhagavata Purana. In his works, he emphasized the importance of the Bhagavata, calling it the 5th Veda. He wrote a commentary called Bhagavata Tattparya Nirnaya on selected verses from the Purana. While Madhva cites from many Puranas in his works, the Bhagavata is the only one on which he wrote a commentary. This indicates the importance of the Purana for him and for the Madhva system. Moreover, Madhva is the earliest extant commentary, Madhva's commentary is the earliest extant commentary on the Bhagavata, most probably predating the Advaitic commentary of Sridhara. Thus, Madhva's Bhagavata commentary occupies a crucial place in the development of the Bhagavata tradition. In this paper, I examine the concept of bhakti as articulated by Madhva in his commentary on the first 3 verses of the Bhagavata. In so doing, I shall argue that Madhva contributes to the history of Hindu theology by articulating the vision of bhakti that is thoroughly dualistic. Since Madhva's commentary is terse, I will supplement my analysis with references to Vijayadvaja's Bhagavata commentary, which follows Madhva very closely. I shall also compare the Dvaita commentaries with the later Bhagavata commentaries written by Sridhara, Jiva, Madhusudana, and so on, when such comparison is useful in highlighting their distinct nature. Since our time is limited, I explore the 2 Dvaita commentaries selectively, highlighting only those sections that are relevant to the topic of bhakti. So the first verse of the Bhagavata Purana, as cited by Madhva, reads as follows: Jamma dyasya yatombayad itarataschariteshu abhigyasvarat tene brahma hridaya adi kavaye muhyanti yam sureyaha tejo bari muridam nyata vinimayo yatra trisargo mrisha damna svena sada nirasta kuhakam satyam param nimahi. So the verse may be translated as follows based on the Dvaita commentaries. I quote, this is my translation. Let us reflect on Vishnu, who is the highest truth, from whom arises the 8-fold powers, such as the capacity to create the world, the powers that are established according to the scriptural evidence and inferential reasoning. Vishnu, who knows everything with all characteristics, who is supremely independent, who taught all the Vedas to the primordial poet, about whom gods are bewildered, for whom the 3-fold creation, which is like the transformation of fire, water, a lump of clay, has no purpose, who eternally removes illusion by the greatness of his knowledge, unquote. So now we begin our exploration with Madhva's Mangala verse. This verse not only serves as the opening benediction, but it also functions as a commentary on the Bhagavata passage. I quote, this is again translation. I reflect on Vishnu, the great one, from whom arises a creation, maintenance, dissolution, controlling activities, the power of seeing, ignorance, bondage, and liberation, unquote. It is noteworthy that Madhva dedicates his commentary to Vishnu rather than to his avatars. Sridhara offers his opening verses to Narasimha, Krishna, and Shiva, Madhusudana Saraswati to Krishna, and Vamshidhara to Krishna and Ganesha. Madhva's emphasis on Vishnu is in accordance with his view that Vishnu is the source of all avatars. Madhva does not promote any particular Vishnu avatara, which reflects his understanding that there is no hierarchy among the avatars. This is in stark contrast with the later commentators such as Jiva Goswami, who promote the supremacy of Krishna. Madhva describes Vishnu as the controller and the source of 8 types of powers, starting with the creation of the universe and ending with liberation. A similar list of 8 powers appears in Madhva's Vishnu Tattva Nirnaya, as well as in his commentary on Brahma Sutra 112. While Shankara and others explain that Jamma-adi indicates that 3 activities of Brahman, namely the creation, maintenance, and destruction of the universe, Madhva adds 5 more powers. By including the powers of creating bondage and granting liberation, Madhva emphasizes Vishnu's absolute supremacy and living entities' absolute dependence on him. In his commentary on the 3rd pada, Madhva makes the following 2 points. First, Vishnu does not engage in the act of creation out of dissatisfaction. Second, his creation is not illusory. According to Madhva, Vishnu's creation is not illusory, but he himself has no purpose in creating the universe. Madhva cites Gaudapada Karika 1.9, which states that since the Lord is the one whose desire is already fulfilled, he creates the universe as an act of play and not out of desire to achieve some goal. Thus, creation is not illusory, but the Lord has no use for it. As for the actual content of creation, Madhva comments that Trisarga refers to the Lord's creation of himself, of living entities, and of insentient beings. The Lord's first creation is himself. This Madhva compares to fire, which appears in manifold forms even though it is one. The 3rd act of creation, the creation of insentient entities from the unmanifest, is compared to the creation of a pot and so on from a lump of clay. Madhva compares the creation of living beings to the reflection on water. Commenting on Brahma Sutra 3-18, Madhva explains that the living entities are similar to the Lord. Therefore, they are compared to the sun's reflections on water, which are similar to the sun. Madhva emphasizes that this comparison between a living entity and the sun's reflection on water demonstrates the following 3 points. A, living entities are distinct from the Lord. B, they are dependent on him. And C, they are similar to him, just as the sun's reflection on water is distinct from, dependent on, and similar to the sun. Madhva also states that this comparison between living entities and the sun's reflection does not teach the individuality of living entity. It's dependent on limiting adjunct. Madhva's interpretation of Brahma Sutra 3-18 squarely rejects Shankara's commentary on the same sutra. Shankara uses the simile of the sun's reflections in order to explain the oneness of Brahman and individual living entities. Madhva uses the same simile to demonstrate their difference. After explaining the 3 aspects of creation, namely the creation of the avatars of the universe and of living entities, Madhva emphasizes that these are not illusory. Moving on to the 2nd verse, the text and its translation based on this to divide the commentary might be given as follows. 2nd verse, Dharma projita kaitavatra paramo nirmatsaranam satan vedyam vastavan atra vastu shivadam tapatraya umuranam. Srimad Bhagavate Mahamani Krite Kimba Parairi Ishvaraha Satya Hritya Varutya Detra Kriti Vishushruvis Takshanat. In this Bhagavata, we find the highest dharma devoid of any deceit, which is taught for pious people who are without envy. In this Bhagavata, we find a Brahman called a Vastu, which we should know, which is real, which bestows auspiciousness, and which uproots 3-fold miseries. When there is the glorious Bhagavata composed by the great sage, what is the use of other goals of life, such as Artha and Kama? Those good people who wish to hear this text establish the Lord in their heart right at the moment, if they're completely qualified, or quickly if they are not completely qualified. According to Madhva, Dharma taught in the Bhagavata is the highest because it is offered to the Lord. Vijayadvaja identifies this highest Dharma with Bhakti Yoga. So here is where we see a clear reference to Bhakti, which he says is the best cause for happiness. To substantiate this identification, Vijayadvaja cites from a conversation between Bhishma and Yudhishthira in Mahabharata. Yudhishthira asked asks what the highest dharma is, to which Bhishma answers, I quote, "I consider this dharma to be the most excellent dharma, most excellent among all dharmas, by dedicating oneself to which a person would always worship the Lord's Eyed One, that is Krishna or Vishnu, by means of praises," unquote. According to Vijayadvaja, therefore, the highest dharma taught in the Bhagavata is Bhakti Yoga, which is to worship the Lord. The practice of this Bhakti Yoga is the most important goal of life, according to Madhva. Commenting on the expression, that is, what is the use of others, kimba paraihi. Madhva explains that others here refers to the goals of life, such as worldly success and sensual pleasure. According to Madhva's interpretation, other goals of life become pointless when we practice bhakti. It is worth noting that this interpretation differs from that of Sridhara, who interprets paraihi in the sense of other texts. Madhva then cites a verse. So according to, if you follow Sridhara's interpretation, then, when there is a Bhagavata, what's the use of other scriptures? But the Madhva's interpretation is very different. Madhva then cites a verse attributed to the Garuda Purana. I quote, "The only and the highest goal among dharma, artha, kama, and moksha is to establish the Lord in the heart. I shall not speak them separately," unquote. Here it is noteworthy that even moksha is subordinate to devotion to the Lord. Vijayadvaja elaborates that this establishing of the Lord in the heart is the highest dharma defined as Bhakti Yoga. According to Vijayadvaja, once we engage in Bhakti Yoga, it becomes useless to talk about other goals. A, because Bhakti Yoga causes imperishable results, that is liberation. And B, because dharma, artha, and kama produce perishable results that cause repeated birth in this world, which we don't want. So hence, dharma, kama, and artha are inferior to moksha, but even moksha in some ways is subordinated to bhakti yoga. This subordination of the four goals of life to bhakti anticipates the notion of prema as the fifth goal and the highest goal, an idea developed by the later Gaudiya authors and also was discussed by Srivatsa Goswami yesterday. Who then is qualified to practice this yoga of devotion? Madhva answers that only good people can practice bhakti yoga and cites a passage from Bhagavata that describes the characteristics of a sadhu. But Madhva also points out that even good people may sometimes become envious, as Arjuna was towards Ekalavya, who, according to the Mahabharata, was even a better archer than Arjuna. Thus, Madhva adds that those who seek for knowledge should abandon envy towards the best people. This question of qualification or adhikara to practice bhakti yoga this qualification to practice bhakti yoga varies depending on the practitioner. Madhva makes this point by differentiating two adverbial expressions quickly and right at the moment. So that's sadhya and tatkshanat. He explains that for those whose qualification is incomplete, the Lord is not established in their mind instantaneously. Vijayadvaja supplies the details. For those devotees, such as Uddhava, whose practice is already complete, the Lord appears at the very moment they approach the Bhagavata. However, for those who have not perfected their practice, the Lord will appear soon when their practice is complete. Therefore, although listening to Bhagavata is extremely effective means for achieving liberation, the Lord may or may not appear immediately depending on the qualification of the practitioner. This differentiation is unique and it reflects the concept of Taratamya, or the hierarchy of beings, one of the central doctrines of Advaita Vedanta. Sridhara's commentary does not connect these two adverbs to the discussion of qualification. And in fact, I don't think Sridhara sort of explains the kind of difference between Satya and Tatkshanat very much in his commentary. So moving on to the third verse, Nigama Karpataro Garitam Param Shukamukad Amrita Trava Samitam Pibata Bhagavatam Rasamarayam Muhuraho Rasika Bhubibhabuka. And then again, based on two Dvaita commentaries, all auspicious connoisseurs on earth repeatedly drink the Bhagavata till one achieves liberation. The Purana, which is juice, which is the fruit, that Vyasa caused to fall from the wish-fulfilling trees of the Vedas, the fruit accompanied by the stream of nectar from Shuka's mouth. Madhva comments only on the idea of the Vedas as a wish-fulfilling tree. He cites a series of verses attributed to the Brahmanda Purana, which liken the Vedas to a tree whose flowers are dharma, the leaves artha, the buds kama, and its fruits moksha. This fruit of moksha is further identified with the Mahabharata, which in turn becomes the Bhagavata when it is softened by Shuka. Here we find a series of identifications between the texts. Here we find a series of identifications between the texts. Thus, the Vedas are first identified with the Mahabharata and then with the Bhagavata. This points to the significance of these texts as well as their hierarchical relation in Madhva's system. On the one hand, the Vedas are perhaps most important in the sense that it is a foundation from which the epics and Purana appeared. On the other hand, the Bhagavata is most valuable because it is most accessible and sweetest. Again, this Madhva's treatment of the Bhagavata anticipates later Gaudiya Vaishnava authors such as Jiva, who radically claims that the Bhagavata is superior even to the Vedas. Speaking of their influence on later commentators, however, it is curious to observe that neither Madhva nor Vijayadvaja engages with the concept of rasa in the aesthetic sense in any explicit way. Vijayadvaja only explains that even though juice mentioned in the verse can refer to any of the 6 flavors beginning with the bitterness, its flavor in this context must be sweet because it is associated with nectarine liquid, that is Amrita Drava. Thus, Vijayadvaja understands rasa only in the medical or culinary sense. In contrast, in his commentary, Madhusudana Saraswati explicitly engages with the aesthetic sense of rasa, mentioning vibhava, anubhava, and so on, which are the technical terms in the Sanskrit aesthetic theories. Now coming to conclusion, in this presentation, we examine the Dvaita concept of bhakti very briefly according to the commentaries of Madhva and Vijayadvaja on the first 3 verses of the Bhagavata. The Dvaita commentators equate the highest dharma with bhakti yoga, which is further defined as the worship of Vishnu or the establishing of the Lord in one's heart. This Vishnu is absolutely independent, who is the source of the 8-fold powers, including the capacity to bind the living entities to the world and to liberate them from it. Therefore, living entities are absolutely dependent on Vishnu, and as such, they are completely distinct from him. Vishnu also creates the world of transmigration to which living entities are bound. This world too is distinct from the Lord, and it is real, although the Lord himself has no use for it. Living entities are encouraged to perform bhakti yoga since it causes liberation. As such, bhakti yoga is the highest goal of life, and it is obtained most easily by studying the Bhagavata, which is the sweetest essence of the Vedas. Given its importance in Dvaita Vedanta and its influence on various Bhagavata traditions, such as the Gaudiya school that flourished in the early modern period, it is unfortunate that the Madhva's Bhagavata commentary has not received much scholarly attention. Moreover, as we saw above, Madhva's exegesis is also unique and is often at variance with the later commentaries. As the earliest extant commentary on Bhagavata, Madhva's commentary occupies an important place in tracing the development of the Bhagavata teachings. Thus, I suggest studying Madhva's commentary merits our attention since it offers a distinctly dualistic interpretation of the Bhagavata, which is otherwise often seen as Advaitic by both traditional and modern scholars. Thank you. So let me stop share. Okay, so that is.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Okita, for this crisp and scholarly presentation. I'm sure there will be a number of questions. We can take a couple of questions here. Those who wish can raise their hands. A couple of questions.
There is a question by Prakriti Goswami. She asked me to ask because she had to leave. Just
Sure.
should I say that?
Yeah, maybe can you read that?
Okay, I put it in the. We'll put it in the chat also. She says, if the adhikara is the adhikara in Madhva predetermined or based on one's perfection of dharma? If it is the former, that means if the adhikara is predetermined, how can predestination be justified as it leads to the damnation of the soul? And if it is the latter, then what kind of karma grants one the adhikara of bhakti?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so let me just, so you just paste it, right?
I pasted it, you can read it.
Yes, I have to. So I guess if the adhikara in Madhva determined or based on one's perfection of dharma, yeah, it is the former. How can, yeah, determination and if, yeah. So I guess this is the question of Taratamya, and the it's a difficult question. Because on the one hand, you know, as famously Madhva's this Taratamya, the idea of Taratamya kind of, it's sort of in some ways predetermined, and the famously, if I recall correctly, in Madhva's in his commentary on Bhagavad Gita, you know, there is a chapter, was it chapter 16? There is a chapter about this sort of demoniac mentality, and then Madhva says, you know, it's like some people, some demons are just eternally damned. It's just condemned to hell, and the nature won't change. So there are some aspects of Taratamya system that it seems kind of predetermined and cannot really change. But at the same time, you know, the fact that in this commentary that we read, Madhva does say that at least for some people, he says, you know, commenting on this satam nirmatsaranam, some good people, they can read the Bhagavata, and then they can sort of practice bhakti, and then they can sort of gradually, if not immediately, come to realize the Lord. So that suggests that the you know, at least for some people, if not all the living entities, this progress is available. But the yeah, I'm not quite sure, you know, where is this sort of threshold of eternally sort of condemned jivas and those who can make progress. I'm not quite sure about the threshold. I need to do some research, but it's a very good question. Thank you. Yeah, so yeah, if you have any other question or comments, I welcome, because yeah, this is sort of work in progress. So
there is a question on the chat again by Ithamar, Dr. Ithamar.
Oh, okay. I don't see the question.
Oh, okay, sorry, maybe, it's sent to me only. It's sent to me only, 1 second.
Yeah,
sorry,
maybe.
It says, can you please elaborate on Madhva's concept of rasa?
Yes, Madhva's concept of rasa. And thank you very much, Professor Theodore, for your question. And then nice to see you after some long while. Yes, and then this is also, again, you know, the topic that I would be interested in getting in like a deeper. And you know, I haven't quite explored sort of Madhva's engagement with rasa sort of beyond, you know, what I looked at in terms of his commentaries on the first 3 verses. But at least as far as, you know, this tiny section of commentary is concerned on the first 3 verses, it seems he doesn't really engage in the rasa in an aesthetic sense. So that is to say, sort of, you know, Madhva's idea of rasa, at least in this context, seems to be more about like a liquid, more sort of, how do you say, maybe more etymologically sort of earlier, original kind of historically older concept of just simply rasa in terms of liquid. And then, of course, like, you know, Sridhar Swami also, if you look at the Sridhar Swami's commentary on the 3rd verse, he again doesn't really discuss much about rasa in aesthetic sense. He just says, rasa only in the sense of like amrita, it's just so sweet nectar. So Bhagavata is a sweet nectar. So that sweetness and liquidity is there, but then not really articulating rasa in aesthetic sense. Yeah, so yeah, Madhva's concept is this sort of more sort of earlier, I might say more basic concept. Yeah, that's my understanding. Thank you.
Thank you for this wonderful presentation and the exchanges. Now we move to the third paper of this session. Our speaker is Dr. Siddharth Satpathy. Let me give his brief introduction. Dr. Siddharth Satpathy teaches at Department of English, University of Hyderabad. He is presently a fellow at the Indian Institute of Advanced Study, Shimla. He earned a joint PhD in English Language and Literature and South Indian Languages and Civilization from University of Chicago. He has taught courses on South Asian intellectual traditions for the American Institute of Indian Studies, Delhi, New Delhi. He is presently working on a book-length study of the narratives produced by the English Baptist Mission to Orissa in the 19th century. He is also engaged in a second research project that aims to produce an intellectual history which focuses on intellectual history and practices of Bhakti in early modern Orissa. We are really happy to have Dr. Siddharth Satpathy as paper reader. His topic is Bhakti in Odia Bhagavata. Dr. Siddharth Satpathy, over to you.
Dr. Siddharth Satpathy is having a internet connection is not so proper here, so he has shared a recording with us. So I will be just sharing that recording now.
Okay.
Can you?
Oh, one second, sorry.
Hello.
Yeah. Can you hear?
I thank the organizers of the conference on Bhakti in Vaishnava traditions, Dr. Shakuntala Gaude, Dr. Sumanta Rudra, and Dr. Ferdinando Sardella for giving me this opportunity to present my ongoing work on the Bhagavata traditions in Odisha. I convey my regards to the Department of Sanskrit, University of Mumbai, and along with the University of Mumbai, I also record my gratitude towards Stockholm University and the Bhaktivedanta Research Center. The title of my paper is The Polite World of the Bhagavata, Homo Religiosus in Colonial Cuttack. I would like to speak for about 20 to 25 minutes, and that would leave us about 5 minutes for a possible conversation. The paper proposes to set up politeness as a category to read Bhakti archives. Politeness is in dialogue with another category which is at work in the present historiography of Bhakti, namely power. Politeness draws attention to those modes of operation of power which enable the formation of a subject position known as the Sujana or Sadhujana. How does one form oneself as a Sujana? In other words, the category will help us to reconstruct processes of self-fashioning and its attendant worldviews. In this theoretical context, I will offer a two-part reading of Jagannath Dasa's Odia Bhagavatam. The first part will provide a thick description of the most important discursive figure in the text, that of the Sujana or Sadhujana. Literally, this term Sujana refers to a polite human. The second part of the paper will offer a short reception history of the Odia Bhagavata in the long 19th century. This reception history will trace how modern Odia discursive response to the Bhagavata underlines the text's ability to create and sustain the Sujana, the polite human. And if time permits, the paper will conclude by briefly showing how the Sujana began to be replaced by other ideals and models of conduct in the first years of the 20th century. Having said this, let me now introduce the text. Jagannath Dasa composed the Srimad Bhagavata in Odia in the 16th century. In course of time, it grew to be the most authoritative and popular scripture in Odia theological canon. The text gave rise to a vital literary tradition. Generations of poets imitated its themes and styles. The text also fostered the formation of a range of enduring social practices around itself, from worship of the manuscript as a deity to formation of a consecrated community hall or halls and collective recitation festivals. In short, Jagannath Dasa's Bhagavata deeply shaped Odia life world over the centuries. Jagannath Dasa, his Bhagavata, has always faced the charge of not being faithful to the Sanskrit original. There was another early modern translation of the Bhagavata in Odia which explicitly sought to conform to the Sanskrit original. However, it is Jagannath Dasa's Bhagavata that is the most popular text or the most popular Bhagavata in Odia theological canon. So, having introduced the text, let me introduce the category politeness very briefly, and then I go into the text itself. Very briefly, the early modern category of politeness, I draw my initial thinkings about it from the work of Christopher Bailey and from Lawrence Klein, who has worked on the category of politeness in 18th century England's context, while Bailey has reflected on the emergence of a polite form of Hinduism in the middle of the 18th century. Here, let me sound out a couple of larger points. The early modern category of politeness is formulated, in my own thinking, is formulated in a discursive, material and social and political space that is not characterized by Western Enlightenment rationality, capitalist mode of wealth production, and national imagination. It offers an opportunity for comparative global intellectual history when we place it besides the category of politeness, which is at work in the 18th century England. Second point that I would like to make, as an early modern category, politeness operates in a world that is theologically plural. The polite human is aware of his own theological location and its boundaries. He or she is simultaneously in conversation with other theological codes of self-fashioning. Often multiple codes of self-fashioning form a common storehouse of tools available to all. While people do recognize the others, quote unquote, there is an effort to avoid sectarian animus. As we move from the early modern to the modern phase, this plural world becomes or takes different or acquires different kinds of shapes. That's the second point I wanted to make. And a third point would be that this early modern model of being a polite human continued to be available in the 19th century, long 19th century, And here it needs to be distinguished from two newly formed modern categories. On the one hand, it's not what reformist Hinduism stood for. So, for instance, Ram Mohan Roy's preoccupation with the form and formless will not be a fundamental question of interest to a polite human of this early modern description. Because the question itself, whether divinity is with or without a form, is perhaps a product of a refined, a fragmented theological world that's more characterized by the that is more comes into being in the 19th century. Let me say this, there are conversations about it before the 19th century, but the point is, in the context of the text that I am dealing with, this question is not of a vital importance. On the other hand, the polite human is not a part of the reactionary response which emerged in response to the radical reformist strand. So it's not a reactionary position either. So having made these 3 points about the category politeness, the way I propose to think more about it, it's a work in progress, and as I think more about it, it would acquire a finer shape. Let me now move to the text itself. The most important discursive figure in the text is that of the Sujana or Sadhujana in Jagannath Dasa's Bhagavata. This is not to say that you wouldn't encounter this discursive figure in other kinds of literary and discursive context and theological contexts. All I'm saying is that as I read Jagannath Dasa's Bhagavata, I find that this discursive figure acquires the most prominence. Literally, the term refers to a polite human. The narrator addresses the reader-listener as the polite human. The purpose of the narrative is to provide counsel and help the reader-listener become a polite human. Thus, the figure both pre-exists the narration and is formed by it. And there are plenty of references or plenty of evidences, textual evidences within the text, and if it's required, I can provide them. Now, other terms are also used to address the reader-listener. For instance, Pandita, Buddhajana. Similarly, there are other terms to describe the ideal human being. Bhaktajana, Dhira Mahasaya. Often, these terms are used interchangeably. Sujana or polite human is the term that is most frequently employed and can stand as an umbrella term to refer to both the reader-listener and the ideal human being. The pious life of this Homo religiosus, Sujana, is produced by a process of conscious cultivation. He or she stands as an evolved form of and apart from a mode of life that is best described as merely biological. This latter condition of a merely biological existence is described through a range of terms such as prani, jibba, and jantu. This form of life is caught up in the web of maya and karma. It is governed by mandamati and brahma. It creates upadrava. It is eventually burdened with patha shrama. So, the polite human self-consciously creates a life of piety out of this general condition of biological existence. It does so with the help of a guru and self-effort. Thus, the jantu, the biologically sentient being, evolves into a sujana, and bhakti is the story of this evolution. And as I said, there are plenty of textual evidences to ratify these points, the general summary points that I'm offering. Now, the polite human has certain characteristics. Two of them are samadrishti and Nirapeksha. The first suggests a form of early modern social egalitarianism, quote unquote, Samadrishti. The latter suggests an impartial vision that is beyond considerations of personal enmity or friendship, is beyond the spirit of partisanship. Let me give an example. Samadrishti is literally impartial, dispassionate, considering all people alike. So the quotation would be from the 11th canto of the Odia Bhagavata, and I read out in Odia. Enu mu sarva bhute thai para apara mora nahi egheni sakala samane dekhutu prema tattva gyane brahmana kshatri vaisya shudra patita chandala ba kshudra sarva samana dekha chitte ଶୁଣ କହିବା କିଛି ତୋତେ ଅଗ୍ନି କଣିକା ବଡ଼ ସାନ ଅନଳୁ ନୁହଁଇ ନ ଆନ. Just as sparks of fire of different sizes and shapes are not different in nature from fire itself. Hence, different kinds of social categories are not different. Sarva samana dekha chitte. View them all as sarva samana, equal. Now, another example of samadrishti. Swabhave sadhu jana jate samana dekhanti jagate tahanka chitta nirapeksha mitra oiri benipaksha. This is an example of both, of samadrishti and nirapeksha, impartial, without a spirit of partisanship. Tahanka chitta nirapeksha mitra oiri benipaksha. Swabhave sadhu jana jate samana dekhanti jagate. This is again from the 11th canto of Jagannath Das's Bhagavata. Now, this polite human who has this samadrishti and nirapeksha as two qualities, this polite human speaks a form of polite speech, madhura komala vachana. This is a part of his self-fashioning. This ability to speak in a language that is madhura and komala, that is a part of the self-cultivation process. And there is frequent emphasis on the point. In opposition to this polite speech stands a mode of interpersonal interaction that is described as tarka or kutarka. While the former is conducive to self-fashioning, reflection, or bichara, the latter is often futile. And we can give examples of it, and if the necessity arises. So, form of speech, a particular cultivation of a particular form of speech, which is madhura and komala, which is conducive to reflection and to reflection, to basically self-fashioning, to vichara, while in opposition to this polite form of speech stands tarka or kutarka, which is not conducive to self-fashioning, to self-cultivation. Now, in contrast to this sujana stands the quote-unquote hinajana, the vile human being, and whose this hinajana is given to kubachana or bad speech or birodhavada, habitually contrarian attitude. And this kind of a figure of the vile human being also finds certain references, and there are examples of it. He is characterized, or she is characterized by this kubachana, speech, and virodhavada, habitually contrarian attitude. Now, and these attitudes are not conducive. The point is, these attitudes are not conducive to self-cultivation. As a discursive figure, polite human refers to an individual in the sense that self-cultivation is an individual responsibility. For instance, to give an example, एहांकु परित्राण दान गोविंद बिनु नाही आन निष्काम जने संसार आत्मा को आपणे उद्धर आत्मा को आपणे उद्धर. You provide salvation. You work to provide salvation to yourself. This is again from 11th canto. This polite human is a self in that sense, the individual self or the individual responsibility. The polite human is conceived as a householder. An ethic, she is also characterized by an ethic of sexual moderation. And at the same time, this polite human is also characterized by the practice of wealth production. That means the ordinary human flourishing, engaging in work and producing wealth is not avoided, is not scorned. So, for example, this polite grihastha, this wealth production, not to wealth production, here's an example. Krusi banijya vyavahare jibika upaya prakare निवास पुर ग्राम आदि जयबा संपद प्रसिद्धि. So, समर्पी मोहर चरणे मोनाम उच्चारी बदने सालोक्य मुक्ति पदतार निवास लभे मोर पुर. This is again 11th canto. So, Krishi, Vanij and other worldly vyavaharas, jivika. So you are engaging with that and you are producing sampada. You are producing wealth. Now, this polite human is also a part of a community. He or she is a sociable creature who celebrates festivals in honor of Krishna. And this figure organizes Abhinaya and Nritya. So he's not only an individual self, a householder who's an ethic of sexual moderation and is engaging in worldly trades and occupations to generate wealth. He or she is also part of a community, a sociable creature who are celebrating festivals in honor of Krishna. Organizes Abhinaya, organizes Nritya. So part of a social life or sociability or a polite sociability. So, is not only this kind of a character, but also at the same time, the polite human can also be someone who opts out of the householder's life and leads a yogic monastic life. So, both the forms of cultivation of a polite self are available, both within the householder's life as well as a yogic monastic life. The polite human has two kinds of pursuits, worldly and transcendental. She pursues sukha, which is more like an experience of relief from pain and dangers in this world. She also pursues mukti, which is an experience of liberation from maya and samsara. And often these pursuits are intertwined. Now the Bhagavata, Jagannath Dasa's Bhagavata, situates the polite human in a theological world, as I said, that is plural. The Sujana is engaged in the worship of Shakti and of Shiva as well. These acts of worship are seen as eventually the worship of Krishna. Similarly, Nirguna and Saguna distinctions are held in abeyance. The Lord is formless as well as with form. Practice of Ashtanga Yoga is also celebrated. Having said that, there are boundaries within which this plural theological vision works. Certain forms of Shakti worship are not endorsed. Certain forms of yogic practices are not endorsed. Those modes of spiritual practices that do not promote the Sattva Bhava are not endorsed. Also, flawed interpretations of the Vedas is frowned upon, and basically the idea is this plural theological world. There are certain boundaries, certain limits which are recognized, and those modes of worship which promote the Sattva Bhava That's what is underlined, and those modes of worship which are not promoting Sattva Bhava are not endorsed. Now, this is what, in terms of a basic reading of the text, a basic close reading of the 11 or 12 cantos of the Bhagavata. Mostly I'm concentrating on 11th and a few more in the early and other parts. So, having offered this reading, let me now take 2 or 3 minutes to offer a kind of a response or a reception history. So, if you go to a reception history, the first instance that I will cite is from a Baptist missionary sources in the 1830s. In the Baptist sources, the missionaries who began to work in Odisha around the 1820s, the first kind of a response that you find is they recognized, and I quote, the Bhagavata as the textbook of the Odia people. This textbook of the Odia people is what I quote from their sources. And this textbook of the Odia people, there are other sources which they cite, which are theological texts, which are popular in or among the people. But this is one that has been described as the textbook, Bhagavatam, Jagannath Das's Bhagavatam. And this particular kind of appreciation of the Bhagavata as having initiated a kind of enlightened form of religiosity, that recognition is there. But given the missionary imperative, their argument would go elsewhere and would say that how there are other forms of religiosity which are more fulfilling and all that. But the point, the limited point that I'm making is that the missionary enterprise, the missionary historians and theologians, the more intellectuals of them, the more finer minds amongst them, would recognize it as the text of the people and would recognize it as a kind of a religiosity which is conducive to a popular, sociable, pious life. So this popular, sociable, pious life, which is promoted by the Bhagavatam or texts like that, descriptions of this kind of a life would also be offered by those missionary theologians and historians which were more cultivated, more sensitive or refined. So here is a description of it. On the occasion, and here is the description of a polite scene of Utsava, a fair, a rural fair. So you would find very descriptions which would emphasize the politeness, the decency, the sociability of the people. So I'll quickly offer a reading. I quote, on occasion of some annual festival or gathering, the Oriyas may be seen dressed in their best. The women going in groups, dressed frequently in blue, orange or crimson silk dresses, while others adhere to their usually clean and becoming white costume. The men generally dressed in white and carrying their little brothers or sons on the heads and shoulders, filial affinity, and their sisters or daughters astride on their hips. Thus they issue in groups from their scattered villages and thread their way through rice fields and jungle to the place of the meeting, that is the fair, the jatra. The people never present a more interesting or picturesque appearance than on such occasions. Assembled at the place where the festival is held, the first business usually is to bathe, then a visit is paid to the temple where the offering is made. The females often receive a red mark where the hair is parted on the forehead, and the men make their prostrations and perhaps prefer their request to the idol. On these occasions, often have I seen mothers bowing down the head of the child and teaching it to clasp its infant hands in adoration of the images. And often too have I felt the wish that Christian mothers generally were as assiduous in teaching their offspring to bow the infant knee and lisp the infant prayer to our Father in heaven. After these ceremonies have been attended to, the people seem to have nothing more to do than employ themselves much as people do in an English fair. They walk about among the shops or goods exposed for sale, listen to the music of some wandering company, attend a short theatrical exhibition, make their purchases, and towards evening wend their way home. The limited point that I am making here is that this polite scene of sociability, this polite scene of Utsava, has a theological validation in the Bhagavata. And when they recognized the Bhagavata as a text, as the textbook of the people, they would establish a connection between this kind of a sociability and the book. So this is one kind of a reception history. The other kind of a reception moment in the reception history that I would like to quickly point out is an early 20th century text. It's a short story by a famous novelist in Odia. It's a short story called Bagula Baguli. And this story revolves around the Bhagavata Ghara, the Bhagavata Tungi, where the consecrated hall where the Bhagavata is kept, where villagers assemble, listen to the Bhagavata, and thereby a sociable rural community is formed. At the heart of this text, Fakir Mohan delineates, the writer delineates, how mastery over the Purana, the Bhagavata, gains a lower caste village chowkidar access to rural sociability, rural respectability. So these two moments, and there are other moments, these two moments I would like to point out here would refer to a kind of a modern Odia discursive response to the text, where, and by the term Odia I mean Fakir Mohan, and also include by extension people who have reflected on, were stationed in Odisha and have reflected on Odia discursive traditions, where this response to the Bhagavata underlines the text's ability to create this polite world of sociability, this polite world of piety, and this polite world of sociability. So I think I would stop here, and thank you again for giving me an opportunity to present some of my ongoing work. And if any questions or queries, I'll be very happy to address them in the Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for highlighting a very novel concept, that of Sujana, or a polite human. The paper is open for discussion. We can take a couple of questions.
Ma'am, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hello, am I
Yes,
audible?
sir. Yes, perfectly.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. The internet is quite dodgy out here, so that's why.
Okay. No, we can hear you properly. I can see Dr. Okita raising his hand.
Okay.
Yes,
So may
sir.
I? Can you hear me? Also, Professor
Yeah,
Satpathy? Yeah, thank you very much for your exciting presentation. I think probably this is the first time I sort of listen about the Odia Bhagavata. So thank you for introducing me to this exciting text. My question basically was about this politeness that you discussed. And then earlier in your presentation, you mentioned that this Jagannatha Dasa's Odia Bhagavata was maybe sometimes criticized for its divergence from, let's say, Sanskrit Bhagavata. So I was wondering if, this, like a Sanskrit Bhagavata, which I'm more familiar with, also talk a lot about like, sats, like, sajjanas, sats. So do you see any sort of like any sort of distinctiveness or uniqueness in Jagannatha's vision of sajjana compared to let's say, original Sanskrit Bhagavata? Is he sort of introducing something like unique, specific to Odia context, or, something distinct? That's just my question.
Okay. Thanks, Dr. Okita, Professor Okita. I'm not actually familiar with the Sanskrit Bhagavata. I'm familiar with only with the Odia Bhagavata. let me start by responding, making 2 or 3 quick points. First, the charge of deviating from the Sanskrit, those criticisms I'm familiar with. The charge which is leveled at Jagannath Das, those are mostly about the number of shlokas, the number of the ordering of the text. Still, a difference that you would find in the 10th canto is that Jagannath Das introduces introduces a character called Vrinda or Vrindavati, who is the unnamed Gopika who we hear about in the Bhagavatam, Sanskrit Bhagavatam. I have heard that. So this particular theological innovation, quote unquote, or literary innovation, quote unquote, introducing the character of Vrindavati, that is what Odia literary critics till now have considered or conceived that character as. And having said that, I do not know whether that character is found in other regional vernacular Sanskrit traditions. So, but it is found in Jagannath Das's Rasa Panchadhyay, the 5 Rasa chapters. And that's one of the key contentions between the Odissi Bhagavata, the Jagannath Dasa Bhagavata Parampara, and the Gaudiya Parampara later on. And for Jagannath Dasa's Chaitanya is the Guru Parampara as well. So, so later on, you would find Odia Vaishnava traditions writing texts where both Sri Radha and Vrindavati would be present in an effort to reconcile both Odissi and Gaudiya Paramparas. So, in short, in terms of the difference, I would need to read more about. I read about the Sanskrit Bhagavata more about it and see what kind of differences one can think of. At the moment, the difference, one of the key differences, is about this character, Vrindavati, who is figuring presently quite prominently in the Rasa Panchadhyay section, and also about the ordering of the chapters and the slokas and number of slokas and stuff like that. So I do not know whether that is satisfying or not, but I think at the moment,
Yeah,
that's
that's excellent. Just quickly,
And-
I'm sorry, this to
Yeah,
follow up this Vrindavati, that's very interesting. So just out of curiosity, because it's so close to my research interest, is this Vrindavati married to Krishna, or is he married to someone else? Can you hear
the
me?
thing we hear is that, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Professor Okita, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, great. No, she is not married to Krishna. If I remember correctly, there is no information about her familial connections or lineages. We only hear that she is the Gopika with which Krishna disappears
Oh, I see.
momentarily from the Rasa Sthala.
Right.
So,
I see.
So as I said, throughout the 18th century, and this is prior, Jagannath Das completed his composition prior to the advent of Chaitanya in Puri. So, so this innovation, this literary, this theological position, you would find present in many of the Vaishnava compositions throughout the 18th century. And as I said, some of the compositions would have both Radhika and Vrindavati present. So, in a kind of a reconciliation effort, or a kind of a dialogic evolution kind of a thing. And now I would just take a moment to come back to the first point that you made about the category of politeness. My understanding of it draws from, as I said, somebody called Lawrence Klein, who has written, basically he's a cultural historian of 18th century England. And the argument there that he's making is that this kind of a politeness refers to a language which laid in late 17th and early 18th centuries, a remaking of the world in the image of the gentleman within England. So I was trying to see whether we can posit the Vakta, the language of the Bhakti and the Sujana, offers a kind of a similar context where we find a remaking of the world through the language of through the image of the Vakta. So that's where I would see a comparative global intellectual history, not necessarily, not that the comparison was present in the historical agents themselves in the 18th century Bhakti or in 18th century England, but rather it's the historian, later historian or intellectual historian like us who would see that connection or would try to see that connection. The basic point is whether we can see, by the term politeness, I mean to say, whether a kind of a language emerges which reimagines the world with the Vakta at the center. And what kind of a social world would that look like? What kind of a sociable world would that look like? This sociability of religion, that is what is one of my important interests.
Thank you.
Am I
Thank you
audible,
very
sir?
much. Yeah, it is. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for this wonderful exchange. It appears that this session will be extended a little, but I am sure it will be acceptable to all. Not only acceptable, it will be a pleasant extension, because this session is really come out lively because of interesting presentations as well as active participation by the audience. So let me thank our speakers. Now we come to the final paper, the fourth and the final paper of this session. It will be presented by Dr. Shakuntala Gowde. She is presently working as the head and assistant professor, Department of Sanskrit, University of Mumbai. With a consistently bright academic career, she has done PhD on the topic eschatology in Vedic literature in comparison with the Western philosophy. She was the coordinator for the section of World Religion and Philosophy for Marathi Vishwakosh. She was invited as a visiting fellow by Kelaniya University, Sri Lanka in 2017. She has to her credit 35 plus publications. She is the recipient of Akademistan Young Teacher of the Year Award in September 2021. I request Dr. Shakuntala Gowde to start her presentation. Over to you, Dr. Shakuntala Gowde.
Namo Namaha. Respected Chairperson, Professor Nirmala Kulkarni, and dignitaries and scholars participating in the conference. Namo Namaha. My topic for today is Govardhana, Haridasavarya, the best of devotee. Govardhana is located in the holy city of Mathura, which is considered one among the 5 Moksha Kshetras. Story of Govardhana Uddharana is popular episode in the Krishna narratives depicted in text and arts. Krishna uplifted the Govardhana mountain to protect Gopas and Gopis of Braja from the torrential rains, which was the outrage of Indra. Govardhana is considered as the Bhagavan Krishna in real sense by devotees. A Bhagavata Purana, we can see the clear identification of Govardhana mountain and the Lord Krishna. Govardhana Parikrama, Govardhana Puja, Annakuta festival, etc. have become the ritualistic part of various Vaishnava schools. Govardhana is worshipped in different manner by Vaishnava devotees. Originally, Govardhana can be seen as a mountain deity, but gradually seems to be subsumed in the Vaishnava cult as the Krishna. Pushti Margins worship Govardhana as Shri Govardhana Nathji or Srinathji. From the philosophical perspective, we can see that there are 3 identities of Govardhana, which became popular in Vaishnava traditions, which are even prevalent in the living tradition of Braja and also the tradition which is prevalent mostly in North India. Govardhana as Bhagavan Krishna, Govardhana as Haridasavarya, that is the best among all devotees of Krishna, and Govardhana as Swamini Swarupa, that is Radha. Now this paper is particularly focusing on the second aspect, that is Govardhana as Haridasavarya. In the Adhyaya 21 of Bhagavata Purana, which is known as Venu Gita, Gopis describe the glory of Lord Krishna and also those who are having the close association of him as devotees. So rivers, birds, animals, all are devotees incarnate in various forms, and they serve Lord Krishna in various ways. So Gopis are mentioning Govardhana as Haridasa Varya. That is great among all the servants or devotees of Hari. So in Bhagavata Purana, in Bhagavata Purana 10:21:18 itself, it is said that why Govardhana is Haridasa Varya. It derives the highest delight from the touch of the feet of Balarama and Krishna. It receives them with respect. It suffices the need of their cowherd friends and cattle by offering fresh water, good grazing ground, caverns for shelter and edible fruits, etc. It is said, Hanta ayam adrihi abala, Haridasa varyo yat, Ramakrishna charana sparsha pramodaha, Manam tanoti, Taha goganayoho, Tayoho yat, Paniya, Suyavasakandara kandamulaihi. This description clearly points out the service rendered by Govardhana to Lord Krishna, which is in very tune with the definition of meaning of bhakti, that is Bhaja Sevayam. Various commentators on this verse of Bhagavata Purana, that is 10:21:18, have literally elaborated the role of Govardhana as Haridasa Varya. So I have taken those select commentaries. Sridhara in his commentary, Bhavartha Deepika, states that while explaining the meaning of Haridasa, that Govardhana is superior among Haridasas. Ayam adrihi Govardhano dhruvam Haridaseshu sreshtaha. There are three Haridasas as per the Bhagavata Purana: Narada, Yudhishthira, and Uddhava. Among these three, Govardhana is considered as the best or superior. What is the reason of that? He gets ecstatic bliss due to the touch of Rama and Krishna, and that is manifested by in the form of grass. That is considered of his feelings of harsha. That is ecstatic bliss is manifested in the form of grass, which is romancha, which is considered as a sattvika bhava. Then Govardhana worships Krishna with water, grass, caves, roots, etc. Therefore, he is the most blessed. So Sridhara uses the word atidhanyaha ityartha. Then another commentator, Vamshidhara, points out in Bhavartha Deepika Prakash that people from distant receive grace just by taking name of God. If one serves the actual God, then definitely deserves being most blessed. Durataha api Bhagavan nama shravanadina janaha dhanyaha bhavanti. Sakshan murti sevinam tu dhanyatvam. Dhanyatamatvam, he says, dhanyatamatvam, uchitameva iti bhavaha. He further elaborates that Govardhana is the best servant of Hari, as he is best among three Haridasas, Narada, Uddhava, and Yudhishthira. So his joy can be marked when Rama and Krishna touch Govardhana. Stones of Govardhana get liquid form. Charanasparshe sati Sheelanam Panka Sadharmya Praptya. Stone becomes soft or like mud, which gets imprints of the signs of Dvaja, Vajra, Ankusha, etc. Dvaja, Vajra, Ankushadi, Charana Chinnam. So, Govardhana getting these imprints of the Balarama's and Krishna's feet is again very the blessed state for any devotee. Then streams of water and grass is again considered by Vamshidhara as symbolic of his ecstatic cry. Nirjara trunodgamadayoho ashru pulakadayopi pramoda vyanjakaha jneyaha. So, according to Sridhara and Vamshidhara both, Govardhana enjoys some blissful state because of the touch of the Balarama and Krishna. And Vallabhacharya, in his commentary Subodhini, writes that though Govardhana is without any wealth, Nirdhanopi, offers 4 types of hospitality to God: grass seat, water, caves, and roots. Paniya suyavasa kandara kandamulaihi chaturbihi atithyam karoti. So, because he is doing this hospitality with 4 types of atithya, even though he is nirdhana, he is considered as the best type of devotee. Now, this particular bhava is elaborated by further in the tradition. Like, for example, Hariraya, who is a Pushti Margi Braja poet, praises Giriraja as Haridasavarya. And he says that Haridasavarya, Govardhana, is full of nectar bliss because it enlightens the loves of devotees. And this is the very abode of Krishna's love play. He is the abode of many stories and merits. Beloved and his lover gets engrossed here for eternal time. So connoisseurs are very eager or very thirsty for having the sight of this. He says, Dhani Haridasavarya Sukha Rasi Nanda Nandana Kau Parama Ramana Sthala Bhakta Janana Ke Prema Prakasi Purana Bhagya Pulinda Ninake Akata Katha Guna Sakala Nivasi Shri Ballabha Balabhi Nita Kredata Rasika Dasa Jana Darasana Pyasi. So again, we can correlate it with the rasa, because Govardhana is considered as the essence of rasas, and the devotees are very eager to have the sight of this. So Govardhana is the best of devotee as he witnesses all the leelas of Krishna. And this concept is reflected in the Pushti Margiya philosophy. Now, according to the framework of the Shuddhadvaita, if we try to understand, we can see that why Govardhana must be called as Haridasavarya, because he witnesses the Leela. Not only that, he gets the greatest fortune of participating in the Leela. Vallabhacharya has commented while in Brahma Sutra 4.1.19 that about talking about the grace of God, that when the grace of God is showered on the devotee, then one can participate in the Leela of the God. So God chooses a particular quality of him to perform the Leela. And when he wants to make Leela, he will choose that devotee and will make that devotee capable of that. Sarva dharmashrayatve api yadayam dharma puraskritya leelam karoti tat karyameva tada sampadyate hitakaritva swabhavatvat tasya evam sati yasmin purushe yad atmatvena leela karoti tada swaprapti anukula prayatnavantam vidhaya atmanam prapayati. So this is the commentary on 443 Brahma Sutra. So he chooses and make that devotee participate in the Leela. And not only that, he provides the appropriate body as well. Bhagavan Leela Upayogi Deha Prapti Anantaram Bhogena Sampadyate, etc. So according to the concept of Shuddhadvaita, we can see that the concept of liberation has a different dimension. It is not getting merged in the God, getting merged in the Brahman, but it is the participation in the Leela or the witnessing the Leelas, which is done by Govardhana. So Govardhana can be considered as a kind of Pushti Jiva, or not only Pushti Jiva, but the favored devotee. Because according to the philosophy of Vallabhacharya, Pushti Jiva gets a chance to participate in the Leela of God, and not the Jiva who is following Maryada Marga. Pushti Maryadam api atikramya Pushti Pushtau praveshe tat tattvam anubhava vishayo bhavati na anyatha tatra praveshaha ati anugrahetara sadhyatvat asadhyatvat. So when it is possible to get participation in the Leela of the God is only by the will of God. It is not possible otherwise. He has well elaborated that in the Sankalpa Deva Tachshrutehe. So that can be understood. So according to Shuddhadvaita, we can understand that Govardhana is the blessed devotee. Then further, Shyam Manohar Goswami, in the context of Pushti Marga and on the basis of the text Garga Samhita, understand Govardhana as the best devotee, but he identifies Govardhana as female form in Madhura Bhakti. So he correlates Govardhana with the form of Radha. When we come to Gaudiya text and particularly the commentaries, Srinatha Chakravarti Pada in Chaitanya Manjusha calls Govardhana as Parama Bhagavata, as he has received grace from Krishna. Krishnanugrahe tad anugraha eva hetuho tadayam Govardhana eva Parama Bhagavataho. Therefore, Govardhana is also, and then he further says that Govardhana also becomes worthy to get grace from. So here is the idea of the worship of devotee of God, bears the same fruit as it gets from the devotion towards God. Jiva Goswami in Gopala Champu writes, he has actually explained or elaborated, we can say, that how Govardhana serves Lord Krishna. With many charming jewels, the mountain named Govardhana offers a sitting place for Lord Krishna. With the cooing of many birds, he offers heartfelt welcome to Krishna. With flowing streams filled with lotus flowers, durva grass, shamaka seeds, Govardhana offers padya. With limitless shoots of darbha grass growing in deer hoof-print puddles, Govardhana offers arghya. With ponds where jati, lavanga, kakola grow on the shores, Govardhana offers achamani. With fresh curd, ghee and honey, Govardhana offers madhuparka. He offers bathing water with which is very clear and transparent. Govardhana offers garments with a golden tree bark. He offers fragrant ointments with fragrant powder, sandal paste, etc. Govardhana offers pleasing flowers like malati. He offers incense by dust raised by the Surabhi cow's hooves. Govardhana offers glittering lamp by shining jewels even in daytime. He offers ornaments with charming gunja, peacock feathers, clusters of flowers, and many other pleasing objects. He offers delicious meals with pleasing fruits and delicious roots. He offers scented water, then the scent of flower with tulsi leaves to rinse mouth. Govardhana offers arati with champaka flowers, other glorious blooming flowers, and gentle breeze. He offers parasol by nakula flowers and other trees. He offers the serving of fanning with blooming branches moving in the breezes of Malaya hills. He offers dancing by the dance of cooing peacocks, sweet singing with cooing of cuckoos. When attracted by Krishna's flute music carried by the breeze, Gopi comes. Then Govardhana prepares a soft couch of flowers. Govardhana with the cooing of cuckoos makes sweet singing. Thus, Govardhana offers worship to Lord Krishna with 21 ways, 21 different methods. Therefore, he is considered as the best of devotee, because other devotees simply offer the worship with just 16 ways. Then, as noted by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in Vrajariti Chintamani, it is said that there is pleasant grove of sandalwood trees on Govardhana hill. There is no snake But even if it comes at the sandalwood, then it is not poisonous. Its poison is counteracted. If sometimes it is poisonous. As the best servant of Lord Hari, he has made such wonderful arrangements for Lord. Stones of Govardhana has precious gems like sapphires, emerald, rubies, and crystals. They provide backdrop for Krishna Leela. If while walking on Govardhana, Balarama sees a series of golden stones, then he understands that Radha must have walked before me. So he changes the course to avoid the awkward situation. Similarly, when Radha sees a series of crystal stones, then she thinks Balarama must have walked before me, and she changes her course. Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakur in Vrajariti Chintamani describes the service of Govardhana in very poetic manner. He says that Govardhana is a king of the mountains who provides royal service to the young prince Krishna with jeweled seat, and expresses his love for him. Rajopacharaihi Yuvaraja Rajam, he says. In the rocks of Govardhana are many jeweled stones, royal throne, couches, beds, etc. So caves and beautiful forest of Govardhana are the place for the divine sport of Radha and Krishna. Trees and creepers serve Krishna by offering him blossoming branches, fruits, flowers full of honey, nectar, and fragrant pollens. Govardhana hills provide pigments of red, vermilion, yellow, and other colors for the ornamentation of Lord Krishna's transcendental body for the pleasure of his beloved gopis. The musk left by deer, kumkum, camphor, and aguru, etc., are naturally produced by Govardhana fragrance. Govardhana fragrance is the body of Krishna. There is a pleasant grove of sandalwood trees, as I said earlier, but no snake comes here. And if at all it comes, it is not poisonous. And again, snakes are useful in the divine love sport of Radha and Krishna. When some gopi get frightened by seeing snake, takes shelter of Krishna and embraces him. When certain gopi is enraged, then Krishna says that I'm bitten by a snake. Then she comes to Krishna with apologies. Thus, best of devotee Haridasa Varya Govardhana is helpful in making arrangements for love sport. The rocks of Govardhana hill are precious gems like sapphire, emeralds, rubies, and crystals. They provide the perfect backdrop for the love sport of Krishna. The necklace of gopis, ornaments, red pigmentation of foot, betel nuts increase the beauty of Govardhana. Krishna is the sapphire and the gopis, the golden necklaces ornamenting the Govardhana hill. The peacocks dance enthusiastically, bees and cuckoos sing melodiously, and many other birds chirp, seeing the Govardhana serving the Lord. The space around Govardhana is filled with many leelas of Krishna. Many streams flow from Govardhana in different directions. So as noted by Steven Rosen, this is the ecstasy only experienced by the greatest devotees, as noted by Kavi Karnapura's Ananda Vrindavana Champu and Jiva Goswami Gopala Champu as well. Govardhana offers his entire body to Krishna. He is blessed with the sight, that is darshana, and touch, that is the sparsha of the God. This is the highest form of devotion where surrender is an essential mark. He not only offers grass, roots, water, but also caves for divine love sport of Radha and Krishna. Gaudiya Vaishnavism has given lot of importance to the divine love of Radha and Krishna. It is considered as the highest form of devotion, that is Madhurya Bhakti. Govardhana has caves where Radha and Krishna are engrossed in divine love. Role of Govardhana as God as well as devotee, which is in tune with the philosophy of Veda. As said by David Haberman, Krishna becomes the very best devotee, Haridasa Varya, to experience the joy of worshipping himself. There is no difference between God and devotee, and yet to experience love, there has to be a difference between the lover and the beloved. Krishna assumes the form of lover and the beloved to enjoy all the rasas. According to the Braja Vaishnavism, Krishna became his devotee to experience the bhakti rasa. There is a requirement of ashraya and vishaya in order to understand this from the perspective of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, as pointed out by Srivatsa Goswamiji, which is noted by David Haberman. On the basis of Upanishadic statement, Nasa ekaki ramate bahusyam prajayeya. Here the Krishna becomes Haridasa Varya to enjoy the bliss of Dasya Bhakti. To enjoy the bliss of love, there is a requirement of dualism, lover and the beloved. The goal of bhakti is not to become the God, but to enjoy the bliss, having some differentiation. So, here the difference that with the Krishna, the Krishna and Govardhana are different as well as one. So here the philosophy of Veda gets reflected. Further, Raghunatha Dasa in Govardhana Vasa Prarthana Dashakam says that literally he pleads to give the residence in Govardhana. He says in one of the verse that, grant me a place in you, as I wish to see the Leela of conjugal love between Radha and Krishna, which takes place in every cave of you. So he says, Nija Nikata Nivasam Dehi Govardhanatvam. So it is the very stotra is composed like whether it is a dialogue between Raghunatha Dasa and the Govardhana. So he himself assumes that the question may be asked that Leela of conjugal love between Radha and Krishna happens everywhere in Vrindavana. Then why you need my residence? So Raghunatha then answers that as you are very dear to Krishna, you have allowed Krishna to sit on Simhasana made up of jewels and pearls. You provide umbrella by shadow of your trees. You give pleasure to Krishna and his friends. So, Nija Nikata Nivasam Dehi Govardhanatvam. Then he says that you are the reservoir of all rasas. You have witnessed Dana Keli Leela of Radha and Krishna. You have created beautiful platform called Shamaka Vedi, from which fragrance emanates. You give pleasure to Rasaraja Krishna and his dear devotees. So Govardhana is revered with the epithet Haridasa Varya. And this epithet, he says, it is given by Radha. So you are the tilaka of Vrajabhumi. Vrajanava tilakatve klapta vedai hisputammi nijanikata nivasam dehi Govardhanatvam. So here in this particular stotra, Raghunatha calls himself as Dina, Karuna, and asks to show mercy on him. So here again the idea that the devotion towards the devotee of the God get reflected, and the Karuna Bhava which is assumed by the devotee also gets reflected in Raghunatha Das. So we can see that Raghunatha Dasa has mentioned about the Krishna Leela of the tax collection, that is that can be seen where there are places Dana Ghati and Dana Nivartana Kunda in the Pradakshina place of Govardhana. Rupa Goswami in Dana Keli Kaumudi describes some of these leelas. Krishna asked gopis to pay the tax in the form of curd, ghee, milk, cream, etc. And all these are symbols of devotion and love, which Krishna desires to get from the devotees. This place is directly associated with tax collecting Leela described by Raghunatha Dasa Goswami also in Dana Keli Chintamani. So by this, there are two texts actually, Dana Keli Kaumudi and Dana Keli Chintamani. And which happens, actually these Leelas happens on the backdrop of the Govardhana. So Govardhana is a witness to these Leelas as well, and therefore considered as a favored or the blessed deity. So in this way, he provides his own body for the Leelas of the God, and therefore he is considered as the most favored. So we can see that in both Pushti Margiya philosophy and Gaudiya Vaishnavism, the idea that Haridasa Varya, Govardhana is Haridasa Varya, is well reflected. But it is more prominent in Gaudiya Vaishnavism because there are not only independent texts, but even as a part of Sampradaya text, Govardhana gets special significance and position as Haridasa Varya. So to sum up, I will say that the epitome of Dasya Bhakti can be seen in Govardhana. The Kaikarya Bhava is very prominently reflected in Govardhana, in the position of Govardhana. There is no difference between devotee and God, but still there is difference. This is the standpoint of Veda Veda. Govardhana is worshipped as devotee as well as Lord Krishna. Devotee becoming God and God becoming devotee is the bhakti mysticism reflected in the concept of Haridasa Varya. According to Pushti Margiya perspective, Govardhana is a blessed devotee as he participates, witnesses the Leela of the God. As Shyam Manohar Goswami ji has pointed out, Govardhana is a feminine form, that is a Radha, who is the highest devotee and the beloved. And this is again in tune with the current tradition of worshipping two Govardhana Shilas, which is prevalent in Braj. These two stones are worshipped as Radha and Krishna. So it can be seen that worship of devotee is highly revered in all Vaishnava traditions. So this is a very important dimension of bhakti, that devotion towards the devotee of the God. And this is common to almost all bhakti traditions, which can be observed in the role and the position of Govardhana. So from the philosophical standpoint, though Govardhana is prominently seen as the form of Krishna himself, as a God himself, his position as a devotee is also very significant and currently prevalent in the tradition. So here I would like to stop and would like to take suggestions, as this is the gathering of the learned people. So because this study is still ongoing, I would definitely like to take suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this delightful presentation. If there are any questions, we can take a couple of quick questions, surely.
Hello, Professor Gaude. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. I'm sorry, I have to leave in 5 minutes. I'll be quick. I was intrigued with this idea of Govardhana as feminine and identified with Radha. And you mentioned that this was discussed by Shyama Manohara Goswami. And if I understood correctly, he is in the line of Vallabha Sampradaya.
Yes.
So is there any, is beyond his own opinion, is there any sort of textual basis for this idea, for this identification of Govardhana and Radha?
Yes, it is related with actually the idea which is there in Garga Samhita, and about the origin of Govardhana, that how Govardhana originated. So because the Radha is responsible for that, Govardhana is considered as a very manifestation of the Radha. So this is one, I think. And another thing is he has given various arguments to prove that often there is saying like Shri Govardhana, it is said. So Shri is related to the feminine form. So Shri Govardhana Nath Ji. So he derives that. Then again, he says that he says that Govardhana consists of jewels and precious metals, that is Ratna and the Dhatu. So Ratna, he understands again in the feminine way. So he says, according to dictionary definitions as well as poetic uses, demonstrate that Ratna is feminine noun associated with Shri and the Gopis, or female lovers of Krishna. Also, he quotes certain Vedantic texts to illustrate that Dhatu is masculine noun, and that can mean Paramatma, another name for Krishna. So from all this, it can be said that words Dhatu and Ratna from this, Ratna is specially for the gopis and the feminine form, so Radha. So he has produced number of arguments that for that, for saying that Govardhana is Swamini Swarupa or the Radha. So David Haberman has included this in his book Loving Stones, and also his essay Three Identities, which is published in Journal of Vaishnava Studies. So that Swamini Swarupa is well elaborated in that. But I focused only on this part, the Haridasa Varya. But again, it is correlated because Radha is also considered as the best of devotee, and in that way also the form of Radha gets connected here.
Okay, that's very informative. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello. Thank you so much, all of you. Now we have come to a very important part of the session, that is expert comments by our respected chairperson, Dr. Nirmala Kulkarni. I request Kulkarni Madam to express her thoughts. Dr. Nirmala Kulkarni.
Hello. So, at the very outset, I extend my thanks to all the organizers for giving me this opportunity to chair the session. As I see in the flyer, all the sessions were well scheduled, and this session is no exception to it. In this session, 4 scholars have expressed their views on various aspects of bhakti. The first speaker, Prakriti Goswami, has analyzed Siddhanta Muktavali by Vallabhacharya on the 10th canto of Bhagavata. Probably it is a commentary on the 10th canto of Bhagavata. And she has focused on Bhakti Rasa. According to her, it is a combination of Adbhuta Rasa and Shrungara Rasa, and through it, it has become a Bhakti Rasa, which is, you can translate into English. She has translated into English as aesthetic mood of Bhakti. She has made a beautiful garland of various originally disassociated concepts and has explained Bhakti in the Bhakti Rasa in the Vallabha Sampradaya. What I expect as a common receptor, that she should have elaborated the process of Rasa Nishpatti, and then it will become easier for persons like us, especially those who are well versed in Sanskrit but do not know the basic philosophy of any discipline. So I would expect that she should elaborate it in the final draft of the paper. The second paper was presented by Professor Okita on Bhakti in Dvaita Vedanta, and he has focused on the first 3 verses of the Bhagavata and the commentary on it by Madhusudana Saraswati. He has tried to re-examine whether the commentary gives dualistic expression through the doctrine of bhakti or not. It is certainly a laudable attempt to search for the dualistic impression cast on the commentary because of the bhakti doctrine. An extremely exclusive theory is proposed by Dr. Siddhanta Satpathy, and he has proposed that one should search for association between politeness and bhakti. And for that, he has analyzed Jagannatha Dasa's Bhagavata, Uriya Bhagavata, in which we find the concept of Sujanatva or Sadhutva, and that is how it is received in the 19th century. And he is trying to build a new theory out of it, especially how the religion becomes social. I wish my best, I extend my best wishes to him for his new theory. I think in many, right from the Subhashitas, right from the Mahabharata, this dualistic Sujanatva, Durjanatva, etc. is used. In Marathi literature also we find the word sadhu and sujana is used to express bhakta or devotee. I think in the question answer session to Siddhartha Satpathy, there was a reference to Vrindavati. I vaguely remember a paper by Professor Shrikanta Bahulkar that this Radha and Vrindavati, etc., how they are related with the Buddhist Jataka. I don't remember it exactly, but I can communicate the title of the paper to the organizers soon by searching it. And how the Buddhist text, how do we get the elaborate account in the Buddhist text? And if we analyze it, we can get the lufuls. We can the lufuls which we see in the description of this Radha and Vrindavati would disappear. This is something. This is I vaguely remember. Then the last paper was by Dr. Shakuntala Gowde, and she has spoken on the Govardhana with the help of many textual references. He has proved that how Govardhana is referred to as Haridasa Varya or the great devotee. In this context, I would like to say that many historians say that the Krishna Vaishnava cult is expressed as Sankarshana Vasudeva cult in ancient time. And Sankarshana is no doubt Haladhara or Balarama. And it was the former cult of agriculturalists. In the inscription of Heliodorus, which I think 115 BC or so, Heliodorus calls himself as Parama Bhagavata. I think in the title Govardhana itself and in the textual descriptions, the cult of agriculturalists is more expressed. So these are my comments. Again, I thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity. And I would like to conclude that this session has reminded me of the position of Brahman in the ritual, Brahman priest in the ritual, in the Vedic ritual. Before the consolidation of the ritual practices of Yajna, in the beginning of the Yajna procedure, Brahman was regarded as well versed in all the three Vedas and also in the ritual procedures. However, once those ritual practices were consolidated, anybody can chair the session, anybody can become Brahma in the similar way without any expertise in the philosophical disciplines. I have chaired the session, so please forgive me if I have made any mistakes in the comments. But these are my sincere comments. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, madam, for your valuable comments. In the capacity of session moderator, I thank all the speakers and audience for making this session very, very interesting and lively. I now call upon Dr. Sapna Chinnurkar to propose vote of thanks. Thank you. Dr. Sapna Chinnurkar.
Hello, everyone. This conference was, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
This conference was organized by Department of Sanskrit, University of Mumbai, in collaboration with Stockholm University, Sweden, and Bhakti Vedanta Research Center, Mumbai. A warm and grateful afternoon. A warm and grateful afternoon to our honorable chief guest, management committee, dear teachers, my dear friends, and everyone gathered here. It's my privilege to propose a vote of thanks and acknowledge the contribution of those who worked really hard to make this event possible. I, Sapna Chinurkar, on behalf of Department of Sanskrit and the entire fraternity of the institution, I extend my sincere thanks to those who contributed towards today's grand event. On behalf of my Department of Sanskrit, I extend a hearty vote of thanks to our chief guest, Dr. Nirmala Kulkarni, who spared her valuable time from her busy schedule to grace the occasion and shared her thoughts, which will certainly encourage us for building further endeavors. Further, I also extend thanks to our guest speaker, Prakruti Goswami, who presented her thoughts on the Bhakti of the Bhagavad Puran, Dr. Kiyokazu Okeda, who presented his thoughts on Bhakti in Dvaita Vedant based on Madhvacharya Bhagavad Tatparya Nirnay. Dr. Siddhartha Satpathy, who presented his thoughts on Bhakti in ODI Bhagavad, and Dr. Shakuntala Gaude, who presented her thoughts on Govardhan Haridas Varya. Speaker's deep and intellectual way of imparting knowledge has added to the glory of this event. I am grateful for our chief person, Dr. Nirmala Kulkarni, concluded the session with summary of the views of participants. Today, all of them have shared effective information which will truly help us in our future life. I also extend thanks to all the speakers who have blessed us with their important and worthy opinions. Last but not the least, a big thank you to each one of you who made the conference memorable. We thank you for being with us. It has remained a pronounced pleasure. Thank you.
One final announcement. Our next session for today will be at 6 p.m. So we will meet all assemble here again at 6 p.m. I officially declare the conclusion of this session. Namo Namah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, madam,
Thank
for
you.
chairing the session. Thank you.